Well, when Joy and I were in school out in Southern California, we were part of Tujunga United Methodist Church. Tujunga is a little town kind of up in the foothills outside of Los Angeles. And that was our church. It was kind of a funny place. It was not your hip church or your cool church or the place where all the folks who wanted to be seen went. There's certainly plenty of those places in Los Angeles. It was a church of folks who just kind of ended up together because they were looking for Jesus. The interesting thing about Tujunga United Methodist Church was we had our different worship gatherings on Sunday morning, but the group that always dwarfed those who were gathered for worship was the Narcotics Anonymous group. It was this huge community of folks who were so invested in life together and so invested in their faith, even though it was often in ways that good church folks found to be a little bit disconcerting because they never were concerned with the appearances that we thought were important sometimes. But if there was ever any need for someone to have a helping hand in that community, you could count on that group coming together and really working hard to live out their faith. And it was always a little bit perplexing to me. What was it about this group of folks that made them so committed to one another, so committed to the church, even though most of them didn't come to Sunday morning worship, so committed to trying to find ways to follow Jesus in their everyday life. And eventually I realized that there is something deeply powerful about being desperate. Because a lot of these men and women in this group, they had known what it meant to be at rock bottom. They had known what it meant to be at the lowest spot in their lives and to say, I need something, I need anything to grab onto to pull me out of this pit. Anything. And as I have been in ministry, I've found a number of folks, and they're always really, really, we'll say, curious people, because their stories are just riveting. You hear the way life has manhandled and roughed them up, and then you see how they, at some point in their desperation, saw this ladder to grab onto that was faith in Jesus Christ, and they took hold of it. Christ pulled them out of that pit. Now, most of them weren't looking for Jesus when they found him. They were just looking for anything. Help. Hope. Something to grab onto. And most of them were kind of surprised that something ended up being Jesus, because a lot of them had gone very far from faith. And yet, when Jesus showed up in their time of desperation, all of a sudden, faith wasn't just something you talked about on Sunday morning. It was the very essence of hope. Desperation has a way of putting us in that spot where we need God so badly that when Jesus shows up, we're going to follow him anyway. And a lot of the folks that I know who are sold-out followers of Jesus have this as their story, because desperation brings us to the spot where we will follow Jesus anywhere. Now, I know some of you all's life stories. Some of you, your stories I know better than others. But what I do know about all of us is that we have spots in our lives where we feel desperate. Sometimes those are just a moment and we move on from that. Other times there are seasons of our lives where we just don't know which way is up. We just don't know where to go. We just don't know what to do. And what I want to tell you today is that in those times of desperation, those are really, really wonderful places to meet Jesus. And when he shows you how to follow in those spots, you're much more likely to go where he's going. Because, hey, what do you got to lose, right? I want want to show you what this looks like in Luke's Gospel. And this is Luke chapter 17. If you remember, we're following Jesus to Jerusalem. And here's another passage that talks about him heading towards Jerusalem, that commitment of his to his journey. So this is what Luke 17 says. As Jesus continued on towards Jerusalem, he reached the border between Galilee and Samaria. As he entered a village there, 10 men with leprosy stood at a distance, crying out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." Jesus looked at them and said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed of their leprosy. Now I want to stop right there, because leprosy was something that would make you desperate. If there was anything in the ancient world that could lead someone to a place of desperation, it was leprosy. Because if you had leprosy, you weren't just sick, but you were completely cast out of the society around you. You were not allowed to be with your family. You were not allowed to work your job. You weren't allowed to go and worship with the community. You were not allowed to be around anybody other than other lepers, because they thought that leprosy was very contagious. And so the best way to deal with it was to cast people out. And so if you had leprosy, you were not only very sick, but you lost everybody and everything that had been dear to you. It's enough to make you desperate. And so we have this group of 10 men who were lepers. And they had been cast out. And they can't even approach Jesus. They had to go around ringing bells and saying, "Unclean, unclean," so that they didn't accidentally get too close to you, so that you wouldn't get sick. And so they shout to Jesus from a distance. They say, "Jesus, can you heal us?" And Jesus just says, "Okay, go. Go show yourself to the priests." Now, I'm thinking, if I were wanting healing, I wouldn't have been quite satisfied with that answer. Are you just sending me off? Are you actually healing me? But you see, these 10 were so desperate for God to do something in their lives that they're willing to take Jesus' instruction at face value, and they just go. All 10 of them. Hey, what are we going to lose? What are they going to do? Cast us out of society again? They're going to laugh at us? We're going to laugh at us anyway. They're going to throw things at us? They're going to throw things at us anyway. There was nothing left to lose at that point in their lives, and so they simply go. Now, the story goes on from here, but I want us to recognize the power of desperation. There are plenty of stories throughout Scripture of people who Jesus says, "Okay, now you can go and this will happen." And then they argue with him, or they debate with him, or they come up with some reason why, well, Jesus didn't really mean for us to do this. But here, the desperation of these 10 men is such that they just follow Jesus without more. And God heals them. As they act out of a faint form of desperation, God heals them. Now, unfortunately, that is not the full story, because they don't all let that desperate faith build into true faith. So let's go on with this. Verse 15 here says, "One of them, when he saw that he was healed, he came back to Jesus, shouting, 'Praise God!' He fell at the ground at Jesus' feet, thanking him for what he had done." And this man was a Samaritan. Samaritans were kind of half Jewish, half not Jewish. Jesus asked, "Didn't I heal 10 men? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give glory to God except for this foreigner?" And Jesus said to the man, "Stand up and go. Your faith has healed you." And so here's the thing. In our desperation, we follow Jesus just about anywhere. But the question is, once that path leads to some sort of wholeness, some sort of healing, some sort of strengthening, are we going to come back to Jesus and continue to follow him? And continue to let that faith that started in desperation, sustain us as we go through life in a place that's not desperate. Because the reality of our lives is most of us aren't in that desperate spot day in and day out. It's a lot easier to pursue faith passionately when you're desperate because that's all you've got. There's nothing left to lose. For those of us who aren't feeling desperate right now, maybe it's worth going to church on Sunday, but Monday comes around and, well, you got stuff to do, right? And so the challenge for us is to come to Jesus when we're desperate, to follow Jesus when we're desperate, but then to move on from there to a place where our faith is strong in regular life. Now, the prophet Elijah in the Old Testament has this incredible story of the healing of Naaman. Now, Naaman was an officer in the Aramean army. This was an army of folks that was often at battle with God's people in Israel. And at this point in time, they had control over a lot of Israel. And this commander came down with leprosy. Same story, right? And he's saying, I am so desperate, I don't know what to do. I've gone and I've prayed to my own gods, because they worshipped a lot of gods in Aram. And there's nothing has happened. But he had this woman that he had taken captive during one of their raids in Israel who said, you know what, there's a prophet. There's a prophet in Israel who can heal you. And so Naaman, who's this big shot army commander, goes to Elisha and he knocks on the door, and he's there with all of his gifts, with gold and silver and food and clothes that he's gonna try to buy a healing here, basically. And Elisha doesn't even come out to meet him. He just sends his servant out and says, hey, yeah, go wash in the Jordan and you'll be healed. And Naaman is furious because he thinks he's big stuff, right? It's like, how is it that the man of God can't even come out to see me? But one of his servants looks at him and says, surely if he'd instructed you to do some big task, some challenging thing, you would do it, right? How much more should you do this simple thing of going and being washed in the Jordan River? Just right nearby. So he says, good point. And so he does what Elisha commanded, and he's healed. He becomes a follower of the true God in that moment. He never would have even known about Israel's God or known that Israel's God was a God to be followed if it hadn't been for that illness that brought him to the point of desperation, where he would try anything. He would go in and wash in this piddly little creek. Jordan River isn't much of a river if you've ever seen it. It changed his life at that moment of desperation. And so what I want us to consider today, what are we desperate for? What is it that you are desperate for? Because if you're desperate, you'll follow Jesus anyway. And when we come to him in those times of desperation, that gives us the chance to build towards true faith. Faith that didn't just started with our need in the moment, but faith that recognizes the power and the grace of God in every heart. So, here's your response. What are you desperate for? Will you let Jesus lead you? And what I want to invite you all to do, we're going to be celebrating communion here in a moment. And so I want you to take that note card that you've got in your bulletin, and I want you to write down what you are desperate for. Now, there's different levels of desperation. Some of us know in this moment exactly what we're desperate for because it's at the front of our minds. It's something we're thinking about constantly. Others of us, it's not quite as strong. That's okay. Think about what it is that you truly long for, more than anything else in your life. What if Jesus would show you the way? To guide you into that. Would you follow? Let's pray. Lord God, we're thankful. We're thankful for the story of these 10 lepers and the recognition of the way that desperation in our lives, that brokenness in our lives leads us to you. It leads us to a place where we're able to follow you and live for you. We pray, God, that you would help us. Help us to bring our desperation to you so that as we seek, we might truly find both the answer to our desperation, but also that which is so much more eternally important. Faith in Christ. Thank you, Lord. We pray this in Christ's name.